Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are, or at what time of day you decide to watch the recording of this call. Welcome to the December call for the OWASP Global Board. This is my penultimate call, where I at least start the meeting as the chair. And for the second last time, I will start by mentioning the director's conflict of interest policy. There may be items discussed this evening that may cause a conflict of interest in your own personal capacities as directors. Please make us aware of anything that you might be cautious of or concerned about prior to those discussions getting too far, so we can decide whether you need to recuse yourself from any potential vote that might be happening. We have quorum this evening, or this afternoon, or this morning, depending on where you are, because I have at least two other board members here with me of the 6 currently in place. Unfortunately, Bill is on vacation and Matt has sent his regrets, and I believe Vandana is unable to make it as well. To that effect, I will do the
attendance.
So,
Yeah.
Ricardo
I am here and present.
and Avi.
Here and present.
Excellent. And I too am here and present. For whoever is taking notes, seeing as Matt is not here and Dawn is not here, Andrew, thank you very much.
I am taking notes.
We also have future board members, Kevin present. And
Present.
Sam.
Here and present.
And Steve.
Here and present.
Gentlemen, you are going to be excitingly running this show as of next month, and I can't wait for that. We also have Andrew and Harold present, staff members, and I see Leah and Chris present. Thank you very much for joining us.
No worries. Thank you. The approval of the previous minutes.
Yeah, the first item of the agenda is indeed the previous minutes approval. Ricardo, have you had a chance to take a look at the previous minutes?
I did, and I approve them.
Excellent. Avi?
Yes, and approved.
Excellent. And yes, and approved from me as well.
Thank you.
The board summary, Andrew, if I can hand it to you.
Okay, and share screen. Can people see my screen?
We can
Yes.
indeed.
Bandana's here.
1 second, let me admit her to the meeting. Briefly, before we go on to the board summary, Andrew, just adding Vandana's attendance to the meeting.
Yeah, done.
Thank you so much. Hi, Andrew. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you, Vandana. I appreciate you joining us.
May as well get her view on the minutes.
Yes, exactly. So, Vandana, we've just done the vote on the previous minutes. Have you had a chance to take a look at them? And,
Yes. Yes,
and
I
can
did.
And you can approve them?
Yes, I approve.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Andrew,
Okay.
take away.
Kevin, thank you so much for letting me know that someone pretending to be me asked for your phone number. We are seeing an increase in the number of spear phishing attacks. If you are at all concerned, please do reach out on Signal or actually call me. I will not ask you outside of bill.com or email to approve any sort of bills or anything like that. It's really important for us to make sure that any bills we do pay or any money transfers that we make go through bill.com and our accountants through our standard JIRA process. I might get Chris or Leah to sort of suggest any sort of improvements that we might have in this area. Obviously, people are trying to do things. We don't know what they're trying to do, but just be aware that if in doubt, reach out. Okay.
and I've seen a couple that came in using my name. If I was to ask you to buy me a couple $100 worth of Amazon gift cards, I would probably do it on Signal. So be verified.
But
I
we
wouldn't
won't.
ask for it.
We won't be doing that.
I wouldn't be doing that. No, I wouldn't. But if I did, it would be on Signal. So you'd know it was me. It wouldn't just be some random text or an email.
Okay. We do actually have a really big bill that needs to be paid before the end of the year. So Grant, I actually emailed you. Bill's out of the office and has difficulties doing bill approval through bill.com.
Okay.
So Chris or Leah, how do we get the approval needed for the Marriott bill to be paid?
That was actually
So
on my,
yeah, I was just gonna say that's the biggest thing on the list that we have right now. As of right now, the email that we have on file for board approval is the global email.
Yep.
But I was noted that Bill said that anyone could really log into that and change passwords or approve. So we just need to come up with, if possible, I can possibly add each one of the board members to the bill.com, and it'll just have that higher group approval like you had on the other bills. And
Yep.
any one of you guys can approve
So
Okay.
if someone is out.
So my suggestion on that, Andrew, is I actually had a conversation with Dawn just before joining this. We had our monthly catch up. She wasn't supposed to be on it because she's supposed to be on vacation, but she did join the call, so I joined it as well. But on that, perhaps creating a treasurer, a chair, and a vice chair accounts on bill.com, and then having Harold alias those to the relevant people on their OWASP accounts might be the best way. So it is personal. It is either a treasurer or a chair or a vice chair, and we can tie it to who actually approved.
Mhm.
But in the meantime, Chris or Leah, I will approve that via email from my email address. So we
Okay,
can at
I
least
will
get it
add
paid.
your email on there
Perfect.
so that it can be approved.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, great. I'm glad because it's such a large bill that I would like it to be paid this year rather than fly into next year and then start us with a bad budgeting position. I'd like to just simply not have to reallocate funds or do any transaction changes. It's just cleaner this way. So Grant, and Leo, if I could get you guys to coordinate that before the end of the year.
It does make DC look incredibly profitable at this point.
Yes, but it's not true. It's profitable, but it's not that profitable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we'll get it sorted before the end of this call.
Okay, thank you. The citizen banking training has been done. Their system is inscrutable. I'll put it that way. They have initiator approver. It's fantastic. They've got all the financial controls in the world. It's just really not obvious about how you go around doing things like transfer funds. So I was stuck there for a little while. They then created an additional user for us to do the approval. All but $300,000 is now in our Chase account. I will follow up with Chris or Leah in the new year. As to what we do with our operational reserves, we don't need 14 months worth of operational reserves. We do actually have a money market account at Citizens, but it might be easier for Chris or the charity CFO to work with accounts at a more favorable institution. So that's probably a discussion to be had in the next year. There's one residual bill that I'm aware of that goes to Citizens, and that is our payroll. I am not going to change that before January. I will change that in the early year. And at that point, Citizens will be, it'll be more or less ripe for being shut down. We've had a lot of inquiries from various vendors who have good fraud controls as to why our financial details keep on changing. The fact that they've changed from time to time as we've gone through the process of going to the charity CFO, going to Chase, and then just to add some spice to the actual equation, Stripe decided to use different Wells Fargo accounts without telling us. And so it looks like we've got all these inconsistencies. And so we've produced an FAQ We've got void checks. We've got a new W-9 that I've signed. So that's got our new address. Trying to explain all of the details and all the changes and how to contact me if they still have concerns or queries. Anybody who needs those things, just hit me up or hit Kelly up, and we'll get them to you. But the reality is that pretty much unless you're paying us, there's very little information that you don't already know. The IRS 990 is the public one for the public consumption is now up, including last year's. I noticed that when I was uploading it, the 2021 one was not up either. So I've put that up as well. Grant, I see you with a finger.
No, I'm just, it was my, what? How did we miss that? I appreciate it. Thank you, Andrew.
No worries. It's now done. I am waiting for the final of the audit report. I think there's one outstanding audit question, which is very simple to work out. I will finish that up before the end of the year, and hopefully we can have our final audit report before the end of the year. They are very close to being done with the audit. Grant and Bill are very familiar with the contents of the audit. We had a clean financial year in 2022, which is a good thing. There is a management letter to be delivered with some advice for us in relation to managing our OWASP VZW entity and its bank accounts. There's some other minor issues, but of them all, I think the one that would be easiest to sort out is, once we've done the bylaws, is to sort out the move to the Netherlands with a new bank account, and then we'll have good management controls over the bank account in Europe. We have started the interviews. We've actually, thank you for your recommendations. I have generally met with the people who've been recommended to me. They did interview well, but I'm still looking at all of the people that came through LinkedIn. I'm hopeful that I'll be able to do more interviews in the early new year and make a decision by the second week of January. I don't want to string people along. There's some of them have been involved in the process for over a month now, and they may be interested in moving along themselves. The onboarding process, if you have not finished the onboarding process, and this applies to our new board members and Avi, please do so. It's really important. You realistically, theoretically, shouldn't even become a board officer if you haven't completed your compliance training, the board source training, and signed the commitment agreement. So if you have yet to complete that, please get that done. Be really good to have it done before the end of the year, so that's one thing off your plate and you can just start the new year. We are closed. We're down to just Harold and myself running the show at the moment, so things will be slow. We have a new mailing address. It is there. I've mentioned that in the previous thing. I've got a new W-9 for those folks who need it. So Chris or Leah, if you need me to give you a W-9 so you can answer those queries, let me know. I'll get it to you. Charity, CFO, please go ahead. And both of you are co-hosts, so you can share your screen.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll jump right into financials and then kind of go over a few of the items that Andrew and I have been working on and our goals for next year. Or next month. Yikes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You guys can see my screen?
Yes.
So sorry, I wanted to have this in the right place. Starting with the balance sheet for the month of November, you can see, as indicated, cash increased by $500,000. And we have yet to pay out the Marriott for that large bill from the conference in November. So cash looks really good right now. It's up $500,000. But our accounts receivable did decrease by $500,000. So you're not seeing any significant change in our net assets. The $500,000 cash increase was already recorded as due from Eventbrite. last month. So while cash is up, current net assets remain relatively the same. And liabilities are also way up, so that's a bummer. Liabilities obviously mostly driven by accounts payable. We do have that large invoice for $726,000 that we've already discussed. That was kind of my big takeaways, that we do need to get that routed for approval and approved as soon as possible. The other $300,000 or so in accounts payable are funds that have already been paid out to vendors during the month of December. So this number will be significantly lower next month. And again, it's driven mostly by the large payable to the Marriott. And you'll see other liabilities remain relatively the same, with our total net assets are down by about $1 million. And again, that's because of expenses paid out or due to the Marriott for the last conference. Moving on to the statement of activity, and I kind of just wanted to take a minute to discuss with you guys. I'm gonna hop down to the bottom quickly and show you that we've recognized a net loss for $932,000 for the month of November. And again, we've made the conscious choice to get closer to a cash-based accounting for you all and for your cash flow purposes and for your review. So these are the kind of variances you're going to see, as opposed to previously having recognized revenue and deferred revenue, not recognizing it when it was received, but deferring it until the time of the event. My understanding is that was not how you guys wanted to see your financial reports and wanted to see it more as funds were received on a cash basis. So occasionally when you have a large event and a large conference, you're going to see a large loss because we've recognized that revenue for the conference as it's come in several months leading up to it, if that makes sense. So I know that's kind of a significant change that's been made in the last several months. And it was your goal to get closer to a cash basis accounting as opposed to accrual basis accounting to see where you're really at from a cash flow standpoint. So that's kind of the downside of that, is occasionally then when you get all of those expenses in at once, you're going to see a net loss. But we'll go over where we are for the year, and you can see we're right on track with budget, relatively speaking. So we'll definitely get to that, but let me know if you have any questions as we kind of bounce through this. You can see for total income for the month of November was down significantly, $250,000 from the month of October. And that's really driven by the conference income. Obviously, expenses increased significantly due to conference expenses. $925,000 during the month of November versus $145,000 in the month of October. We're not seeing a lot of other significant changes in expenses across the month as far as regular operating expenses. They're relatively as expected with little variance. And showing a net loss of the $932,000 for the month of November. And again, that's because we've been recognizing revenue as we've been receiving it for multiple months leading up to the last large conference, and yet recognizing all the expenses now. I think we'll have some good reporting on the profitability of that conference probably next month.
Mm-hmm. Will the year-to-date be mostly complete, or will the book still be open for some time?
So we will present financials for the month of December in the January board meeting, so we'll have them completed.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, expenses can always trickle in. We're going to try to have everything as tied up as and complete as possible, but there could be some expenses trickling in, and we don't really have a lot of control over that. So numbers really we don't really consider the numbers finalized until at least 60 days after the fiscal year end,
Mm-hmm.
just to make sure
Okay.
there's nothing outstanding that we're not aware of.
Cool.
But for all intents and purposes, we should have final reporting in January.
Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
Chris, a quick question. I see duplicate items for swag and food and beverage. Is there a particular reason for those?
Let me hop onto that. Leah, could you look into that? While we,
If you
might be-
scroll up, yeah, they were both on the first page. And for example, here, see food and beverage, there's 732, and there's
Mhm.
next to it, there's a 878. It's a separate line. Why was it not added up together?
let me look
It
at,
was just a double.
Leah, are those two separate accounts? And can you tell us the difference between the two of them?
There's no difference.
It's just a duplicate account entry.
Mhm. Well, actually, wait, no, yeah, it's the same account.
Yeah, and few lines up, there's a swag. Also, there's a no, that one makes sense because that's debit and credit.
2 different months.
Yeah.
No, this
okay,
is two different
accounts.
months.
Yeah, those different months. Yeah. But obviously that food and beverage looked strange. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. We'll take a look at the chart of accounts. I'm not sure. I know that there's a lot of changes in the chart of accounts and some cleanup done. So it's
Yes.
possible that one of those should be inactive and it's not.
No, so I have a suspicion that the 720 is the bill we were talking about earlier, and it would have carried over from last month. So that's probably what we're seeing there. The food and beverage duplicate one, that 720,000 is probably actually due last month, wasn't paid yet, so it's rolled over.
Yeah, it still should show. In
It
the-
should
in-
still be in one account.
Yeah, it should
Okay.
still be in one account. I'm gonna look and see what those two accounts are real quick. Give me just a
It's the
minute.
same, Chris, I'm looking at it.
They're titled exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can you merge them and we'll just
Yeah.
have one and the same for swag?
Yep.
Okay, I think that's just a
Okay, so
quick
further
push
down
issue.
at the bottom when you were at the summary, there was the same thing. So swag appeared twice. And
The one at the, wait, at the bottom?
yeah, I think it was on the same page.
Oh, it was maybe in the budget page here. No? Yeah, here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. You can see the swag twice and food and beverage
Yes.
as well.
So this is
So
gonna be the
once I
same.
merge the two, it'll just say one on one
Yeah,
line.
this is kind of the budget report, so you're gonna see the same chart of account. So if it's duplicated in the statement of activity, it's gonna be duplicated here as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get those merged and you'll see them as one line item moving forward. Any other questions right now before we move on to the budget comparison? Okay, so again, our income for the month of November was a loss of $932,000 and a net loss of $180,000 so far year to date. I hate to say, I don't want this number to jump out and scare you guys because this really is just, like I said, our kind of intentional move towards closer to cash-based accounting versus accrual-based accounting. When you have large events, you're going to see those large numbers, but moving on to the budget summary, you can see our year-to-date income. We're right at 3.1 million almost versus a budget of year-to-date of 2.7 million. We're $355,000 over in revenue for the year. Good news. Conference revenue is up significantly. Donations are up significantly on a percentage basis. It's a relatively small amount, but we've really brought in, you know, a large 4 times more than we were expecting. And membership income is down by about $90,000.
Yeah. Does the membership income is corporate and individual membership, or just?
There's two.
Yes.
There's a
Yes.
corporate and individual.
Yeah, and
Okay.
you can see corporate membership specifically is down,
Okay.
while individual membership is almost right on track.
Hi,
Good to know.
Technically,
Harvey.
we don't have corporate members. Is that an issue? Or is that just taxonomy?
It's just taxonomy in the chart of accounts. We can always rename it.
We probably want to rename it in the chart of accounts, so at least it maps up with everything else.
I'm sorry, what is that?
So go for it, Andrew.
Yeah, corporate should be called corporate supporters. Could the chart of accounts be updated to include the word supporters?
Sure.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Because technically members have voting rights and corporate supporters no longer have voting rights.
Gotcha.
Very good. Okay. Going down to expenses, we are over in expenses. The amount we're over is pretty close to the amount we're over in revenue. So we're kind of on track for a net loss for the year, a little bit over what was anticipated. But
How
you can
much is
see
legal?
conference expenses are significantly over budget.
Mhm.
General administration and operating expenses are under budget quite a bit.
Mhm.
I assume that that's probably, it looks like travel is significantly under what was anticipated.
Mhm.
Payroll and personnel charges are also significantly under. Total expenses for the year are 3.2 million with a budget year to date of 2.8 million. So we're $388,000 over budget in expenses. And again, compared to $355,000 over in revenue.
Mhm. Okay.
We have a net income year to date of loss of $180,000, a budgeted loss year to date of $117,000. So slightly over. The loss is slightly more than anticipated.
Yeah. So some things that we'll be doing next year, we are hiring one additional person, so our staff budget will go up. But I will actually ask Kelly and Lauren to keep an eye on our expenses. We're actually obtaining legal advice at the moment in relation to VAT for Lisbon, so that we don't end up paying VAT. Or if we have to pay VAT, we'll know about it and therefore budget for it properly. Similarly for San Francisco, we don't want to get caught out again with paying, I think it was in the order of $65,000 in tax for Washington, D.C. because there was no exemption certificate beforehand. We can avoid that.
Absolutely. And just to go over next steps that we're working on, Andrew and I have been working closely together on the budget for 2024 and expect to have that finalized in early January, I would assume, Andrew.
Yeah.
Is that our target date?
Yeah.
Once we have the budget finalized, we will be submitting a cash flow forecast for 2024. And that'll be submitted every month with financial reporting moving forward. I do have one now prepared, but since we're out of budget, it really only shows December and it's not very meaningful. So we didn't share it this month because it's a single column. But once we have that budget in place, we'll definitely share the cash flow forecast on a monthly basis. And then dependent on the cash flow forecast and, discuss options for your reserve funds and what we might want to do with cash on hand. We certainly suggest that you guys keep 90 to 180 days, really, especially the way that your expenses fluctuate throughout the year. I would suggest that you keep at least 6 months cash on hand at any given time. But I think that you're going to exceed that and look at investment opportunities, or maybe, I know you have a money market fund now, but maybe anything over 6 months cash on hand, looking at a short-term certificate of deposit or something else to maximize revenue income or interest income. So those are the kind of things that Andrew and I are discussing moving into January. And that is all I really have for you guys today. Are there any questions?
I have one observation for the board, particularly the incoming board. We normally ask the board members do travel to the AppSec conferences, and we know that there will be a board summit, so board travel will be up next year. If you don't intend to be at AppSec Lisbon or AppSec San Francisco, could we please know that before like the first couple of weeks of January so we can budget for it properly? Good. I'm glad to hear it, Kevin. Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else we can help you with today before, or any other questions for us?
No, I think we're good. Thank you so much for the presentation. I've uploaded the materials. Leah, if you reissue the management report with those duplicate lines done, I'll upload.
It looks like it's actually just placed in the wrong spot. Our
Mhm.
Fathom system, our reporting system jumbled up the accounts. So I have to go through and fix them
Okay,
after I've refreshed. But yes, I can send it, resend it.
no worries. Thank you so much.
All right,
Sam,
thank you
did you
all.
have a question for us or?
I actually have a question for Andrew, which is related to this part of the conversation. This
Okay.
is about updating official OWASP.org website with OWASP's new physical and mailing address.
Mhm.
I've noticed it has been done, but we still have on one page, but we still have a lot of places where still Wakefield, Massachusetts address is used.
Okay.
And also one other thing, because obviously under in your part of the presentation, you mentioned that FAQ document will be produced to reassure the vendors and partners that our bank and address change and mailing address change is not fraudulent. Again, it would be good to have that document officially published on OWASP.org and have it on the same page where the new physical address is listed, or at least a link to it to be provided.
Yep. Okay, so let me just share my screen again. Can you guys see the document? It's probably pretty small.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yes.
It's
Pretty tiny
yeah.
there. Yep, that's better.
Yeah, so it's done. I basically will spread it around. What we might do is make a public version of it without the void check details. People don't need to know our banking details publicly. The people who do need to know them are those who are actually paying us. So that's done. I can make a public version of that, Sam. That's a really good idea. I will get the others updated.
Thank you.
Okay. We
Okay.
have, thank you
We're
so
gonna
much,
jump off.
Chris.
If you don't need anything for us, I did want to say good job on you guys communicating the fraud alerts that you've been receiving. We've gotten seen a huge uptake in those in our
Yes.
organization as well, in text messages and other things. So glad you guys called that out. And we will never send you anything that's not outside of email or bill.com, obviously, as well. And if you ever have any questions about any kind of financial communication that you receive, feel free to reach out to us.
Well, we're all naturally paranoid anyway, so.
Well, right. I mean,
We also tend to
yeah,
have a
I
bit of
don't,
a sense of
sometimes you
humor
see
when
that
it comes
stuff and
to
you
it.
wonder who could possibly fall for it. But
It
anyway,
happens.
you guys have a great day. I hope you guys
Have a good
get
one,
to
guys.
disconnect over the holidays
Cool.
and enjoy your break.
Thanks,
you
you
too.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, we have broken the 8,000 barrier on membership, but it's not real. We have a problem. People have been signing up en masse for the free accounts from Israel and Ukraine. So it's on pause at the moment. Harold, could you just describe what you've been doing and just go through if you've got a proposed solution, what it might be and what sort of time frame it might be?
Sure. So back on Thursday or so, Dawn and I had noticed that we're running low on accounts in our Google space. And that's not abnormal. That was not caused by this particular problem. It's because we have a lot of suspended users that we keep hanging around. Some of them are very old. So really, we decided to go ahead and start deleting some of the really old suspended accounts so that we had enough room to create accounts for chapter members and whatnot. When that happened, that was fine. Friday came around, I actually had deleted a lot more accounts because I wrote a quick program to do it. And around Sunday night is when I realized that we had a whole lot of memberships being created since Friday. And they were constantly being created one every couple minutes or so. And most of them from Vietnam, it seems like. Once I realized that, I just talked to Andrew, various other people, decided to go ahead and put everything on hold as far as the force majeure creation. Right now, what I'm doing is identifying what the accounts are, the ones that came in since Thursday or Friday. All of them that say that they're Israel, Ukraine, or West Bank. I have looked through the vast majority of those and determined that the vast majority of them are from Vietnam. So what I'm going to end up doing is removing all those accounts, all those complimentary members in that time period. And all their associated data. So there's 4 different places where that has to be done. And once that's done, I will come up with a way to better determine whether or not somebody's from Israel or Ukraine than what we currently have, and set it back up to go ahead. However, that is taking me some time. It's probably going to take the rest of the day to finish out cleaning up the accounts, but we should have at least that part of it done by the end of the week.
Yeah. So long story short is currently it's on hold. We'll figure something out, and it'll probably be the new year before we get a proper solution in that'll make it. As I was discussing with Avi this morning, this actually shows us what might happen if the board decides to provide free membership with Google accounts. So if you ever decide to do free membership for whatever reason, please don't include Google G Suite accounts in the free membership tier. There could actually be a real substantial pent-up demand for free accounts, but it looks like they're being used for spamming. So let's not provide them G Suite. It's just that's a membership benefit that we've had since 2005. It's very hard for us to go back on that. We have a lot of systems in place that rely upon OWASP.org membership. So do think about this if you ever decide on a wider complementary program. That is a decision for the board to make. My recommendation would not be to provide that information, the G Suite account for complementary members, but we need them for leaders. We need them for the Ukraine and Israel. So at the end of the day, basically, we'll figure something out here. I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention. But it's actually an interesting time that we've had more than 8,000 members. We've flew through 7,000 in one fell swoop. So there is that. Avi.
Harold, did you happen to notice if there were any or how many actual real accounts there were there? Order of magnitude?
From what I can tell, it's a handful, maybe 2 to 5. Yeah. But no, I have not gone through and just filtered them all out.
Listen, I even got Ofer Mauer to sign up again.
Oh,
hey.
excellent. Very good.
Sam?
Yeah, Harold, the question. So I believe we should have some safeguards in place because complementary accounts are reserved for OWASP chapter leaders or project leaders. So
And for
was there any
those,
verification to make sure that the people are actual leaders? Because I believe you do have a leaders list of both chapter
Sam,
leaders and project leaders.
I wasn't going to go into the details, but yes, that is definitely something that's being taken into account. I check whether or not the person is a leader or not before removing their account.
So Sam, the reason the question you're asking is how are their individual accounts being created for people who are not leaders? It's because the board enacted a force majeure memberships access for anyone in a war-stricken country. So individuals from the Ukraine, from Palestine, and from Israel can sign up for free membership.
Right.
So this is
okay.
separate.
Which
This is separate from the leaders' memberships, and
is
that's
that then
being
open
used.
to anybody?
Open to individuals in those 3 countries. But apparently our checks to ensure they're from those countries were not technically sufficient. And that's what Harold's correcting now.
Yeah. I mean, this is an operational matter. I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention because it actually may have some impact on future decisions relating to offering other tiers of membership.
So it's unlikely I will be on the board when this conversation returns. So just my 30 seconds on this. It is possible to use Google as an IDP without allowing access to sending email or to storing data. So be aware that you could create 2 groups within your Google Suite, one which has access to store data and to send emails because they're leaders, and one which has access to Google to OWASP.org as an IDP, identity provider, but nothing more. So they can't spam using Google.org, OWASP.org, and they can't fill up our storage capacities. But just be aware that you would have to think about what it is exactly you're giving those membership tiers if you decide to separate them.
I just want to
And you-
point out, Grant, you are likely to be having this discussion next time you're on the board in 10 years.
Very true. Very true. In 10 years' time. Thank you, Avi.
So one of the things that previous boards have actually discussed is pay anything you want. That's a possibility. I mean, setting fees for membership is the board's prerogative, as is setting the benefits for members. And with that, I wish to ask if there's any questions, because the rest of it is about events, and events, we don't have anyone from the events team here today, so I wouldn't be able to answer the questions properly for you. I can get them on notice. Are there any questions?
Not from me.
Okay, Grant.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That brings us to new business. And the first item of new business is the board summit for 2024. I am assuming that the 2024 board have been discussing the board summit and that there are some dates in place.
I have been
March?
reaching out to hotels in the New York area, including EWR and JFK. We don't have a quote back from them yet, but we are assuming that it will be in March. There's 2 different dates in March, so I've asked for those 2 different dates to be priced.
Sorry, Andrew, I think there was one date in March and one date in February.
Oh, I thought it was March 4 and March 18. I
think
could, honestly, we've not had a response yet, so I can always go back to them and say, could you give us a price in February?
Is there any more to say on that topic? I mean, it really is operational. It is important. I'm glad to see it's early enough in the year. March is fairly early. You guys are going to want as much time as you possibly can together in as early in the year as you possibly can to try and get some of the work done that you want to do.
Grant, can you say a few words on the purpose, intent, and importance of the summit? Because I don't think I explained that well.
Well, we have a global overall strategy now for OWASP, but each board member has their own own desired outcomes they want to achieve, their own projects they want to fit into that big picture. And it's important to sit down with the rest of the board and talk about what those projects are, talk about what those outcomes are that you want to achieve. Because as a lone board member, you cannot do anything. You need to get a majority. And that means you need to convince people that it's worth them spending their time on this thing that you're trying to achieve. And I've gone through all of your presentations, all of your videos on what it is you want to achieve next year. Now I've actually had a chance to review them all, and I can say that you all have great ideas, but you are going to need help getting those ideas through. And one of the best ways to do that is to sit down in a room with these individuals who can help you achieve those goals and explain to them why it's important for you and for the foundation. And unfortunately, in the room is a big part of that. We've run board summits where it's been partially remote, and it does work. You get through the work, but unfortunately, the people who are not in the room, who are not present, tend to lose some of the context because there are things that just aren't captured on camera, or there are conversations that end up happening while you're having lunch or when you go break for coffee, or, I mean, wherever you happen to be, if you're staying in the same location, you tend to run into each other and still continue those conversations because they're still front of mind. So being in one place is incredibly useful. Having those conversations as an official talk is necessary, but the unofficial conversations that happen between are just as necessary to get you to that point. In fact, we had to, in Amsterdam, try and do some summaries of things that happened over lunch because you can't not talk about things to the rest of the team that wasn't at that lunch with us. And that means you end up spending time duplicating some of those conversations that otherwise could have just been had where they were. But the importance is there is so little time to get things done. A year or 2 years will flash by in a blink of an eye, and you'll be wondering at the 18-month mark why you haven't yet done that thing you were thinking about 6 months before you joined the board. And the answer is because it wasn't spoken about in February or March, and it didn't happen in April when things hit the ground running. And it's key to get things started as soon as possible. You guys will be closing out a number of things that I started 4 years ago to give you an idea of how long this can go. So yeah, it's important to be at that summit. If you can't make it in person, that's sad, but do make the time and try and spend as much time as you can still online with the team while they're talking about things. So when they break for tea and coffee, try to stay listening to the conversation and contributing from your kitchen on your mobile phone or on your tablet. But if you can get on the plane, please get on the plane, because that's still going to be best. Even if you have to eat kosher food. I'm kidding. It was actually probably one of the best meals we had.
Yeah, agreed.
I certainly learned something new and hot to add to my repertoire.
Spicy school.
Very good.
Okay. It sounds like you've got some dates, and I hope that lots of you will be there. And I can't wait to see what you guys achieve, because I've got really high hopes for this board. And if there's nothing else, I will take us to the discussion on the board's independence. Speaking of the board, discussing the board.
Sounds good, Grant.
So Avi sponsored this, and you have been continuing the conversation, Avi. So do you want to bring us up to speed, the rest of us up to speed on where you're at?
Sure, this is something that started several months ago, kind of got put on hold and then stayed on hold for a while. The idea is twofold, and there are two sides to this. Number one is to make sure that no outside interest organization can take over the board or get undue influence over the board by a single company sponsoring and enough members to push multiple directors onto the board, for example. It, as somebody pointed out a long time ago, it would not cost a lot to buy membership for enough people and then vote to get a person on the board. You do this enough times and you have multiple directors on the board. So the first side of this is that we wanted to limit the number of directors on the board from a single entity, whether it's people employed at a company or associated with a competing organization or anything like that. The other side of this, and it's different but still connected, is one of diversity. We don't want to have the entire board coming from a single city, right? So hypothetically, if we had a New York City chapter, it would be quite large, and we would have easily enough votes there to get 3 directors on the board. Is that good? Are they the same? Obviously, they're not the same people just because they're from the same city, on the one hand. On the other hand, it's not representative. It's not so much a conflict of interest. Sam, this goes to your comment, by the way, which I completely agree with, right? It's not so much that they're from the same, like they have a conflict of interest. It's not like they're all going to be voting, let's funnel all of our money to this one chapter, right? I'm going to pick on New York because there's no existing chapter there. But we don't want to have multiple directors from the same city. It's not when we have entire countries and continents without anybody being represented there. So it's about diversity and representation. Now, Sam, to your point, we can split these out. We can pull that one point out of, not having multiple directors from the same city, from the same chapter, whatever, and take the rest of that forward, because I think both of those needs stand alone. It made sense to me to combine it because logically they're very similar and the handling of it is very similar. So this is the background, right? The motion as it reads is not trivial, but the idea is to not have 2 directors from the same company, from the same association, from the same officer of the same other nonprofit, or the same OWASP chapter. If there are 2 from the same place, then it needs to be resolved one or the other, or they can't take office. But we also have a stipulation there to vote on an exception. At the last summit, this came up because the elections had already started. Steve, this is thanks to you and Jason. Jason?
Hang on. So wait, context. This was being discussed before the individuals who were on the ballot was announced.
Right.
And
Yeah.
when we realized that 2 individuals, Steve being one of the 2, from the same company were on the ballot, we realized we had to put this on hold because we couldn't influence that election.
We had actually put it on hold before the election, Grant.
Yeah.
We decided that because we had already opened the call for candidates before we finalized this resolution, we said we're going to put it on hold until after the elections are done. But once we did see who the candidates were, realized, hey, there's a problem here, because it makes absolute sense for these 2 individuals who happen to work at the same large company. It makes absolute sense for them to both be on the board. And it's clear that there's no undue influence or any kind of anything shady going on. So we put this stipulation in that we can have that exception there, and it makes perfect sense.
I also loved how you picked on the currently non-existent New York chapter, where London would have been a great chapter, considering Sam and I are both from London, and a previous chair, Sharif, was from London, and Denise, and there's a long history of us Londoners.
There are several chapters that,
none of which, by the way, were born in London.
But listen, there are several chapters that are large enough to always be able to vote a director in if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Right.
Bangalore.
Bangalore.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if there was a candidate from there, listen, we know that elections are not perfect. Majority of people do not vote purely on platform. It's to a large extent, too large probably, it's either popularity or the name that you know, right? So you're going to probably be familiar with the person locally to you, and a lot of people will vote for the person they know because they like them, because they know they're going to do a good job. I'm not saying that they shouldn't get in there. But the issue is when you have a chapter that is large enough to consistently vote and get a director from that city in, If there are multiple people running, that means there's going to be multiple directors from that same city simply because it's the same voting block. So I'd like to, Grant, can you switch over to the resolution document if you have that open?
I do have it open, but it's currently not my screen that's being shared.
I was going to mention that link doesn't work.
The link to the page doesn't work. I can drop that here in the chat as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Are you logged in to OWASP? It might be limited to OWASP.
I will update the document.
And did you drop the link into the chat? We did. Are you seeing the link?
We're seeing your page open, yes.
Okay.
I see some new comments being added that I hadn't seen before. Oh, yesterday. Okay.
Is it
so
large enough
I'd
to
like
read?
to go through and address some of the comments verbally. I think it'd be simpler and easiest. Starting with Steve's comment during M&A. Listen, it can happen, but this is an exceptional process that we can deal with as an exception. I don't think policy resolution needs to account for every possible situation. Is that fair? And again, we already have the idea of an exception that we can vote on.
Okay, so, but then that also begs the question, if an M&A does happen and the vote is not successful, what then transpires? If this is policy, we need to think that through.
Yes.
I kind of feel like this is, while not completely unlikely, it is a bit of a remote occurrence, and I would like to leave that to the board to deal with at the time. I know it's a kind of a cop-out answer, but otherwise it just gets too verbose trying to account for every possible thing.
Yeah.
But the other part of the problem
At that
is,
point, I think the board will have to make a decision.
so one of the things that actually happens at another organization that I sit on the board with, many of you who know who I'm talking about, what happens when you have related companies that are wholly controlled by another organization, such as, yeah, exactly, Steve's point exactly.
Yeah.
IBM, GitHub and Microsoft, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that would be a board vote at this point, given the current writing of the
Document. Yeah.
of the resolution. So it's relying on the good judgment of the board that's currently in place to determine what the new board structure will look like.
Steve, I want to back out for a second and ask you, other than the details that you're addressing here, and there are always going to be some edge cases, other than the edge cases, are you in agreement with the idea of this resolution? Is it just a question of the legalese and the wordsmithing around the edge cases?
Absolutely.
Okay. So let me ask you, what do you think should happen in those cases? Or is a cop-out for now a decent enough answer?
I think that really depends. If we're talking about business units of the same organization, then probably not. But if we're talking about legally separate entities, like in the case of like a Red Hat and an IBM or a Microsoft and a GitHub, then I honestly don't know. I don't know if that should fit. I don't know if that should fit under here or not.
Yeah.
I can think of reasons why it should, and I can also think of reasons why it shouldn't. It really depends on how much control that the owning company actually has of its subsidiaries and how much autonomy those subsidiaries have. If you look at IBM and Microsoft, or IBM and Red Hat is fairly autonomous to do whatever they want for the most part. If you like it, Microsoft and GitHub, that's not necessarily the case.
Which is exactly why I said to not try and put all the edge cases into policy.
I don't think this is an edge case, though. I think this will happen.
Yeah.
The M&A, an edge
It's still an
case.
edge case. It's still an edge case. It'll happen, but it's a likely edge case.
Well, think about it. I mean, the edge case of this was not even approved yet, and you had an edge case where two project leaders that both just happened to work at the same company were going to run for the board of directors, and I ended up winning. Jeremy, for other reasons, he had to pull out, but there's a high probability that, because if, again, the name you know, there's a high probability that he would have done well. And we would have encountered this exception case on the very first try. So I don't
100%.
think it's an exception.
Right. Well, no, I meant M&A or board or company ownership, affiliated companies. I meant as the edge cases.
Yeah, the M&A I think is an edge case. I'm not sure about the subsidiaries though.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an edge case.
My thoughts, Avi, honestly, are that as much as this might be an edge case, the odds of having two people from a large company that happens to be in the AppSec area, both being very, very passionate about AppSec and both wanting to help the OWASP Foundation and the OWASP community, that's pretty large. So even if it was just in the company who, for some reason, we're not naming, versus a Microsoft or just a GitHub, I think it's more likely, if you extend it to anyone in GitHub or Microsoft are then, in the same company, that just makes the edge case a larger use case, because the odds of two people from GitHub being keen is pretty high, let alone if you include everyone in Microsoft as well.
Let alone known each other in those large companies.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much Stephen and Jeremy work together on things.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys work for a large company, so it's likely that that's not a huge amount, but you are still at the same company and you're both in the same space and both keen to help OWASP out.
Yeah.
But
for the record, if this had been in place and you had both been elected to the board would have then voted. And my feeling from the board when we saw this would have been that you both would have been allowed on the board, because there was clearly no collusion. There was clearly no desire from your company to take over the foundation. But I think there is baked into the current wording a way for the current board to decide, is this situation we have okay? And all this is going to do is have the current board, one, be given specific powers to deal with situations where we think that might be collusion, and two, have the board take a step back and look at newly elected individuals and go, is this the right mix? Is this still good? Is this still acceptable? Which without this, the board doesn't have either that power or that requirement to take a look at things.
So if we want to include subsidiaries, then I would recommend specifically calling that out, because as written,
It doesn't.
Subsidiaries would not be.
An issue. Yeah, that's true.
The other issue I had, moving on down, I think, yeah, the next paragraph, there seems to be an assumption that there's going to be a first director and a second director. Well, what if they happen simultaneously? That's a race condition, and we almost have that.
But Steve, they're still in order. The way the voting, the way the election works is that there's the first one, and then the count continues, right? Highest votes get allocated.
Right, but it doesn't say that.
Yeah, so technically, the results of the elections come in, and before that is announced, someone reaches out to the newly elected, the board elect, to find out if they're still prepared to take on the role as the director. And if you're not, then the vote slips past you. So that's why there is fundamentally an order in how you're appointed. So you were all appointed in order of the votes.
And it should say that. So I've spent the last 5 years developing international standards.
Mhm.
Ambiguity is something we try to avoid, and I
Yep.
would love to avoid that in here as well.
So clarity in that text is key.
Yeah.
Andrew.
Okay, honestly, I'm going to play a bit devil's advocate here. I honestly think we could trust the members to vote properly and give us the board that they're asking for. Do we actually need to do this? I mean, if the board and the incoming board thinks this is a good idea, then I'll stand down. But honestly, I've not seen any bad behaviors on the other board that I'm on from related companies, and the advice and the drive from the people who have this sort of conflict has helped them move forward that would be absent otherwise. I just think that you may be overcomplicating this to the point where it's just not necessary. But that's my 2 cents, and I'll put my hand down.
You put your hand back up again. Sam.
My point on the company side is, since we're discussing race conditions and things like that, my suggestion here would be to modify this to require that the people who are nominated for the board of directors to complete the conflict of interest form. So their affiliations are known before the vote, not after they've actually been voted and saying, sorry, people voted for you, but because there's another person from the same company, you're not getting in. Right.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because obviously I see the point on the company side, but yeah, if it's a simple form to complete where people can complete the form. And again, going back to subsidiaries, there's another interesting thing, because shall we go with subsidiaries or without? Again, a simple test to suggest would be what name is on the payslip that the person receives. For example, people employed by GitHub will have GitHub Incorporated. People who are employed by Microsoft will have Microsoft Incorporated, but Microsoft owns GitHub, but technically they're paid by different legal entities which are part of the same group. So that's
so definitely the first part of that I really like, because it then speaks to Andrew's question about trusting the membership to make the right choices. And if the membership have the potential conflict put to them when they're making their decision, they can take that into account. I don't think that precludes the board needing to have this power. Avi.
As we've seen relatively recently, conflict of interest can be not so simple. Some people do have more complicated situations and don't want to disclose everything and don't want to make it public either. I really like that, letting people see what people are affiliated with before you vote for them, but it doesn't work for everybody. Just want to point that out. And the idea isn't, the issue here isn't that the membership have voted for people with conflict, but rather that it can hypothetically be abused, not by our current membership, but that it can be abused by rogue membership.
Sam?
Avi, in this case, right, I know what you're talking about, but I'm not suggesting that the conflicts of interest should be made public before the elections. I'm suggesting that the form that all the candidates submit to the board will include the conflict of interest at that time. And obviously, I totally agree that conflict of interest is a dynamic thing. It changes very frequently. And as per OWASP policy, every time conflict, something need to happen, even before every single board meeting, the chair asks, are there any new conflicts of interest that you should be aware of based on the topics of discussion or any changes from last time? So, but I think the prior disclosure to the board will actually eliminate a lot of the bad cases here.
So
Quick follow-up question to that, Sam. Are you, do you think this will not create friction for potential candidates and cause people to not step forward and nominate because of the having to disclose even if they don't get elected?
Not really, because disclosing conflict of interest is an integral part of the board member, and they will have to do it anyway. So let's start early and make sure that they understand that this duty, the duty of loyalty, starts from the moment they becoming a candidate.
So I want to clarify, the conflict of interest and loyalty are two very different things, just to be clear about this, right? I might have investments, or I might be an advisor to a company or an investor in a company, and has nothing to do with my loyalty to OWASP, hypothetically. The reason I mention this is because we recently had somebody that went through this and took them a while to deal with the conflict of interest because they wanted to divest some of their stuff before they disclose all this. The issue that I'm making is not that they should keep the secret, but rather there might be some individuals that would not want to go through that process unless they get elected, in which case they would. Right? They just, for hypothetical election, they might not want to. I mean, we could say no. You want to, even as a nominee, you have to go through this. I'm more worried about the friction and blocking some candidates from stepping forward from it.
Yeah,
So
but we did lose a board member due to not filling out the conflict of interest form, and I felt that was a really bad outcome. It could have been avoided. I'm worried about that friction.
Steve?
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about this a little bit more, many of the companies that we might be worried about in terms of takeover of the board also have very diverse talent pools. My ServiceNow, my company, I mean, we've got developers all over the world. Thousands of developers in India, for example, nothing but security people. You look at some of these other large organizations too, and it's Middle East, Europe, Africa, wherever. That actually could promote diversity in a way, if you look at it. So we might want to remove the diversity aspect away from this document and focus purely on the corporation side. Because like I said, the corporation could actually, even if you had 2 or 3 people from the same company, you could have a very diverse pool of contributors, of directors.
I would tend to disagree with that. You would be relying on someone else's diversity, let's call it. And that's really not a good idea. We need to do things that are in our control to be done. So I think that should stay in there. And completely my opinion, but but we do want a diverse board because we have the numbers on our side, right? Diverse boards actually perform better. So we want to do something that is totally within our control.
But I understand the point, and this goes to what Sam was saying as well. Not that to not have it at all, but to split it out to something that's separate, and have, this is what you're saying, Steve, right? Have this resolution be focused on independence and blocking takeovers, and maybe down the line we'll have a separate resolution that looks very similar, but that talks about the diversity and cities and
Exactly. I just think that they don't belong together. I believe they both should exist. But
Well,
removing the company aspect from takeover will actually decrease diversity in some cases.
I don't think it would decrease diversity.
I don't think so. Yeah,
because we have the
I
option.
can't follow that logic. So
I kind of follow it if we don't have the exception, because hypothetically, if we had a very diverse, let's say multiple candidates from the same company get elected, right? So we have multiple potential directors, and like you said, all over the world, very diverse group of directors. And if each one is individually makes sense, and they have a history of participation, and they're not trying to squeeze their way in and take over the board from the company, and it's clear that there is no collusion or anything like that, then the board would vote on bypassing that conflict and accepting that. But I understand where that's coming from, and I understand why. I don't think this would reduce diversity, but I understand why logically you want to separate that, even though the resolutions would look very similar.
Yeah, I think
So-
separating them is, I think we have a consensus that separating those two things is probably for the best, because one of them is to prevent a bad and the other one is to encourage a good. They have very different core purposes.
Okay.
But then I would argue for Ricardo that we should probably have the
I would argue that they're both required, right? So you need them both, and by separating them, you run the risk of one overriding the other, or vice versa, or nothing happening. So in my mind, I see those as joined together. I'm trying to see points of view here, but I'm probably not getting there. And I also want to add that we've discussed this a lot, and I think we have a way forward. I don't think there's a sticking point here. We have a way to vote from the board to decide if that member needs to be on here or not. So we pretty much have taken care of any edge case that may come up. So I want to move that we kind of push forward with this because I think we can talk all afternoon and still come to the same conclusion here. Or still be talking, roundabout. So I don't want us to keep rehashing the same points of view. In my mind, we have a way forward. Let's move forward with it.
Sam.
Yeah, I think the split should happen because, of course, if you read my comments, I am strongly against the second part about OWASP chapter or project leaders because if you say encourage the good, but this is different. This is not encouraging diversity. This is actually creating a barrier to entry to people who are committed to our mission. And as such, this clause will be, if voted for, will be anti-mission, because OWASP chapter leaders and OWASP project leaders have proven themselves as leaders and active members of the community. And the fact that they are being elected for the board, every single person here is a project leader or a chapter leader, right? And some of them may happen to be on the same project or chapter, like you and I, Grant, and obviously previously yourself and Sharif, right? But we are all serving the same mission. So it should be separated from the actual fiduciary conflict of interest, where the company can have corporate interest in influencing the board members. And an OWASP chapter leader or OWASP project leader, in my opinion, but being on the board is only supporting the mission. The fact that they're from different geographical areas and diversity is a different thing, but forcing diversity and forcing people not to be on the board is not the way forward. And then where do we stop? First, we start with chapters, projects, then we're going to start with, cities, countries, continents, genders. It's a very, very, slippery slope. So I think for the independence, my suggestion is actually completely to remove this resolution and replace it with a different resolution, which is OWASP board candidates must submit a conflict of interest form to the board, and I think that will satisfy it.
So a couple things. First of all, the issue isn't trying to force diversity, but it's trying to avoid a specific voting block having voting for multiple directors, right? The diversity might come as a result of that. It might not. Again, you might have multiple very diverse people, a very diverse community in the same city. Again, London, just because you live in London doesn't mean you are a typical English aristocrat, right? So it could still be very diverse from the same city, but it's still representative of the same voting bloc. And that's the thing. Now, in order to hypothetically push forward the first part of this, I am in agreement with Ricardo. I would very much like the second part to be there as well, the chapter part to be there as well, and either ideally in the same resolution or at least in a separate resolution. But in the interest of getting the first part of the resolution pushed through, preferably unanimously, I would be willing to split that out and deal with that. I think there's a lot more nuance on that second part in order to get this pushed forward. So as I see it, the only thing stopping us from getting to some kind of consensus here is, one, that clause around the project and chapter leaders, and two, figuring out the subsidiaries. The other part is the language around the order of the directors being elected, which I put a little bit of language there. I hope that is specific enough. We can wordsmith that in a second. So the main two things are the chapter, which we can, I think, split this out, remove, and figure out what we decide about subsidiaries. Does this make sense?
It makes sense, and thank you, Abby. And are we voting today, or is this just to finalize the document?
I think it depends if we have consensus on the amended.
So if we have the wording, I'm happy to call for a vote because Avi's brought this. If Avi is happy with the wording and is happy for us to go to a vote, I'm happy to bring it to a vote. Andrew?
I think we need to make sure that we're not overriding the Delaware General Corporate Law. There is a fiduciary duty of directors to represent their company as their first priority. So essentially what I'm trying to say is that when you become a director, you already have a duty of care towards OWASP. And so I would encourage you not to put language in that essentially either duplicates that responsibility because it's already implicit in the Delaware law. I mean, essentially, we don't need to state it again. And so what I would also suggest is we don't want to have barriers to entry to volunteerism. It's hard enough to get good volunteers for projects. Some projects are very, very specialized. Some chapters, there may only be one person who's driving the actual thing. I honestly think anything that stops volunteerism is a bad thing. And I would encourage you to split those two things in two.
So if we remove that second line, Andrew, does that satisfy your position on this as well as yours, Sam?
I'll work with what Sam wants because I'm not on the board.
Well, I'm not
technically
voting.
nor
I don't
Sam
have
either.
voting rights right now, but
there are only 4 members of the board here right now. There are a few, yes,
You're
but
forgetting
so
that-
this was supposed to be a discussion, not a vote, right? According to
Right.
the agenda.
And technically, Andrew is a non-voting member of the board.
that is
I know, but I mean, essentially, you're changing the qualifications for being a director, and I would hate to see a barrier to volunteerism. It's disheartening, and yes, people can wait for the next time around, but we haven't really considered the possibility that, someone comes onto the board, the next election, and then the next election, and the next election. You could have 4 people on the board from the same company with the way this is currently worded.
If it makes sense, yes, with the right people.
Yeah, but surely
I
the
would
members.
take 4 of Steve and Jeremy on the board, no problem. I would not be worried about collusion there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be worried if there were 4 Steves on the board, because I think Steve would agree with Steve, and they would both agree with Steve, and all 3 of them would agree with Steve.
I would be terrified.
Consistency is not the problem here, Grant. Consistency is not the problem. On the other hand, if there's 4 of me, we would not be consistent.
Okay, so technically,
sorry, Grant,
was
can I
this
just one more thing?
Yeah. Sure.
What Andrew was saying about the barriers to volunteerism. I want to bring this back to what Sam was saying around candidates need to disclose everything as part of the nominee process, before the elections. I really think this might be a problem. And we saw at least one person that did get elected, but wouldn't have gone through this process if he didn't get elected. And I think that, throwing up more barriers for people before they even get elected, before they even know if they're going to be volunteering, just standing for the election, I'm not sure. And I'm very ambivalent about this. I'm very torn about this because it makes a lot of sense, but I also see the downside to that. So I just want to address this and come back to that.
So I think we should take some more time to kind of think this one over then.
I would agree that there's still far too much discussion to be had on this topic before it's ready for a vote.
Yes.
Sam, can I ask that you are contributing to this document, but perhaps further down in the document, rewrite the wording as you see it might make sense and try and get consensus on that. Avi, taking the suggestions from today, rework this section to see which of the 2 is more appealing to the board, and then we'll pick it up in January.
And we also need to decide about subsidiaries.
Yeah, you also need related companies. Like, for example, the big 4 accounting firms are 150 plus companies that are all related, but they don't control each other. Are you going to permit that?
I like Sam's simplistic approach to that, to be very honest with you. If you both have the same name on your payslip, you work for the same company.
No, but like Deloitte London versus Deloitte Tel Aviv versus Deloitte New York, it's going to be
it's going to be a different company.
But they also all have different agendas.
They do.
Different name tends to be different agenda. I mean, not that it's the same agenda within Microsoft. If you have Microsoft Inc. on your payslip, there's probably still 500 different directions that company is going,
and different CEOs. By the way, the CEO of GitHub is different from CEO of Microsoft.
No, he went in Microsoft.
Different board.
But even within Microsoft, there's different divisions that are very different directions.
Yeah, like I said, more discussion to be had in the
yes. So the only thing I want you guys to take away with both of you reformulating this and getting the input from the rest of the board on the potential options, the idea here is to give the board the power to prevent a hostile takeover.
Yes.
So think about it in those terms. Think about how that power needs to be exercised by future boards.
Yeah,
don't try to make it.
Is actually very, very key here, Grant, because OWASP's own groups, chapters, projects are not hostile. They're friendly.
Well,
we should not be protecting from friendly fire.
But that's
friendly now, but we want to prevent anything that might happen, that's not that friendly. So I really need to think about that.
In January, you and I will have a conversation about that.
The issue with the chapters, just to be clear, is not about hostile takeover from London or New York or any other city. It's about representing having, we're a limited number of people on the board, and we're ostensibly being representative of the entire global OS community. It's kind of hard when half of the board is from the same city.
Avi, then you're talking about forced diversity again, because you're forcing board
It's not
members to be from
diversity.
diverse areas rather than being all people dedicated to the same mission. Right.
It's not diversity, it's representative of different voting blocks. And you can't ignore the fact that all the 3,000 members of the New York City chapter, hypothetically, will be voting as a majority voting. The majority of them will be voting as a single voting block because they happen to see the same director standing up every other month.
Then that means we have to change completely the bylaws and the structure of OWASP, because what you're talking about is making sure that each OWASP chapter and OWASP project gets only one vote. So it's similar to the United States of America. And then only one person votes, right? That's
Okay.
the only way. That's what
We're,
you're saying.
no, we can't. We're a membership organization and individuals get to vote.
So
Yeah.
so take this away.
Yeah.
Focus
let's-
primarily on the avoiding hostile takeover. And hostile doesn't mean external, Sam. It just means a capture of the board for a particular purpose. Sorry, Ricardo, you were saying something.
No, I was in agreement with you, and I think we've discussed this one quite a bit now, and I'm happy to move on when you're ready.
I just and I want one more thing. The part that we pulled out of here, the representative and the diversity, and it needs a lot more work, both in even before the wordsmithing. So Ricardo, I'd appreciate if you could work with me on that to find something that would satisfy Sam's constraint here.
Sure.
Again, in parallel and separate from this.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, that brings us to the last item on the agenda, which is a 2023 end of year celebration.
Interesting.
Before we get there, it's
Uh-huh.
Grant and Vandana's last board meeting as official members. I know you're the chair for the first part of the next meeting, but it is Vandana's last meeting. And I just wish to thank you both for your service to the board for the last 4 years. It's been a pleasure to serve with you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. And the team is amazing. Everything went super smooth. I learned a lot personally.
I will echo the I learned a lot personally part. And thank you for all of your help. These 4 years would not have been possible without the staff, without the rest of the board members.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. However, smooth is not how I would describe the last 4 years, but not
If everything was easy to do, it'd be we'd have lots and lots of people volunteering for the board. It's not easy.
It is both easier than you imagine, folks that are joining the board, and also harder than you can ever predict.
Yeah, we never had that many keyboard fights ever, but it was fun. Trust me. It was like a big journey, which has come to a very smooth process. I would say that. But yeah, it was a learning journey. Amazing people we met, and the whole staff, Andrew, everyone was super supportive. That's what we can
And
say.
Vandana, I would like to say a separate huge thank you to you, because for those of you who don't know, Vandana has been featured very recently in the BBC documentary, where she raised the fact that she is a board member of OWASP. So now everyone who watches BBC knows about us and knows about the important work that we do. Thank you, Vandana.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
Okay, so one of the things that I just wanted to highlight for the new board members is we've got a huge opportunity to really go to the next level next year. And I really do want you to start thinking about what are the things that we could do differently. I'd love for you guys to, we're not just projects and chapters, we're events, we're the community, we're outreach, we're a whole bunch of different things. So could we do better? Absolutely. And I'd love to have your fresh ideas being presented and acted upon. We're currently in the process of hiring a director of community development. I'm hopeful that that person will actually help us reach out to developers, do better marketing, do better grants, do better fundraising, do better donor management. There's a lot of things in that role. So yeah, looking forward to your new ideas. We need better grants. Yes.
Yeah, the one we had sucks.
Yeah.
By the way, if you don't know, the pictures from the OWASP Global AppSec DC conference have been published. There are a lot of photographs of all of us who were there. So I invite you to go and check it out. It brings back a lot of great memories from the conference.
Where are they published, Sam? You got a link for us?
Yes, they are on the DC website. There is an event images page. I will share it in a minute with you.
Perfect. With that all said and done, the next general board meeting, which I will make a brief appearance in, and maybe Vandana will be there, but most likely she will, for the first time in I don't know how many months, have a a board meeting where she doesn't have to get me in the middle of the chaos that is home life. It's on January 23rd at 12 p.m. US Eastern Time. And can I have a second for adjournment?
Second it. This time I did it first, Abby. It's the last one.
And I'm going to take Vandana's one there. And with it moved and seconded to adjourn, those in favor say aye.
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 Excellent. For the new board members and the ones continuing, I did send out board invites for the rest of 2024 for the board meetings. Once you've decided upon your officer positions, I will encourage you to pick a time and a date for a board prep call, which will be recorded for those that can't attend. This board decided that people can attend optionally, but I would encourage general attendance to the board prep call so that everyone can have their voices heard. And with that, Sam.
Yeah, just very quickly, Andrew, can you please clarify on the when does the board vote for the positions? Is it at the very first board meeting in January, or does it happen before?
You can certainly have discussions beforehand and then come to the board meeting with those in your back pocket. However, I would encourage, just for transparency's sake, that you do this at the first board meeting next year.
Which is what every board has done. So the very first item of business, Sam, in the next board meeting will be the election of the new chair. And at that point, I will hand over the chair responsibility to whoever you vote for that chair position. And then they will, as their first item of business, oversee the election of the vice chair and the secretary and the treasurer.
To be clear, we're talking about the first regular
official.
The January 23rd meeting. You guys will meet before the January 23rd. You've hopefully got a
in time for that, for the first meeting, the long kids meeting. I know we had discussion about it. I don't know what we decided.
I don't think that's been booked yet.
No, that's not booked yet. Probably the Doodle or Google Forms would be great.
Yeah.
If that is a grant, as I think, is that the same meeting you need to brief us, or is it separate one? Because we also need to have a one
So,
with you, right?
so yeah, so
Shall I stop the recording?
yeah, please do.
Yes, please.